Today we're talking about chemical compounds and little concept about ethnobotany. Tropical plants, which are pretty abundant in rainforests, have chemical compounds to defend from potential predators. Since the most commonly found organism in tropical forests are plants, the second most commonly found organism in a tropical forest we should think are insects. Insects, for the most part, feed on plants, and plants, therefore, have evolved chemical compounds to defend themselves from their atrocious attacks. To the eye of the insect, this world that we're surrounded by is not painted in color. This world is painted in chemical compounds such as cocaine, morphine, nicotine, caffeine, and many others that are present in tropical plant leaves. Scientists call these chemical compounds contained in leaves secondary compounds, and these are called secondary compounds because they don't have a vital function in the production of photosynthesis, which is the green pigment, everyone knows that, found in leaves that aids the plant in the uptake of nutrients and regular living of the plant. But these secondary compounds are also called defense compounds because they also have a vital function to protect the plant from the attack of insects. This complex chemistry probably evolved by a genetical accident, and these mutations over time became replicated because by being defensive and by trying to avoid insects, plants would produce more of these substances in order to discourage the insects. And so this is a theory that has not been proved, but it's probably one well-accepted theory on how these chemical compounds evolve. Today we are going to just explore some of the chemical compounds that are found in tropical plants. So at a glance, my friends, when you look at the myriad of plant life on the ground, definitely you are looking at a myriad of possibilities of chemical defenses that plants have to counteract the attack of not only insects but other herbivore predators. Let's talk about alkaloids. These are extremely well known and very familiar drugs, as you all know, and as we said before, very familiar names are within this group, such as cocaine from coca, morphine from poppy, cannabidiol from hemp, caffeine from teas and coffee, everyone knows that, and nicotine from tobacco. Taken together, there are approximately 4,000 known alkaloids globally distributed among 300 species of plant families and over 7,500 species of plants. A single plant here in the rainforest may even contain 50 different alkaloids, which is bizarre. Alkaloids are also found in temperate zone, from where you guys are, and it's estimated that approximately 20% of all vascular plants contain alkaloids. These chemical compounds are not only found in leaves, but almost everywhere in the plant, including seeds, roots, shoots, flowers, and of course fruits. Like in coffee, for example, there's a high content of caffeine in the fruit of coffee. Most alkaloids are bitter, and they tend to interfere in both the liver and the cell membrane function. when ingested in high doses. They may also cause lactation problems or cessation, abortion, or birth defects. Many, of course, as we know, are addictive, like cocaine. So, of course, some alkaloids may function as an insecticide to certain insect groups. Some alkaloids also serve as a defense compound, but they also have the ability to store carbon and nitrogen in the plant. Phenolics and tannins are other chemical compounds usually found in tropical plants. Tannins, for example, which are used to tanning leather, are found also in temperate forest regions, like in oaks, for example. In the tropics, that is also true in highland forest oaks, as well as in mangrove forests. Interesting studies have indicated that in order for the plant to produce tannin, it needs to be completely exposed to the sun, or it's got to have a pretty good exposition to solar radiation. That means that in order to produce tannins, plants require a higher requirement or higher dose of solar radiation in order to accomplish photosynthesis. So tannin seems to require high photosynthesis levels of production in order to exist in the plant. Plants in the shade, on the contrary, probably have more difficulties in the production of tannins. And of course, it's because the access to the sun is definitely more limited. Phenolics are small proteins stored in the cell vacuoles and are broken when insects or other herbivores bite the leaf. When they're released, phenols combine with various proteins make definitely the digestion process a little more difficult. Leafcutters, for example, major leaf predators in tropical rainforest, seem not to be bothered by these chemical compounds at all, which is kind of interesting. Another chemical compound that we find in tropical plants are saponins. The saponins, which are soap-like compounds, are very common in tropical forests, and they have the ability to act in the destruction of fatty components of the cell membrane. Some indigenous people utilize saponin to poison and capture fish. The way they do it is just by throwing plants that contain saponin compounds into shallow water, and this will act by suffocating the fish. Another compound is cyanogenic glycosides, and everyone knows cyanide to be the deadly poison. Many species of tropical plants contain compounds called cyanogenic glycosides, consisting of cyanide linked together with a sugar molecule. When these two combine, or when they combine with enzymes from either the plant or the herbivore digestive system, the sugar is definitely released, leaving hydrogen cyanide. This will immediately intoxicate whoever is ingesting these leaves. In the tropical rainforest, and here in Costa Rica as well, manioc or cassava, type of cassava, contain high concentrations of cyanide or cyanogenic glycosides, I would say. And these, of course, are contained in the roots, which is the edible part And in order to get rid of that, locals and indigenous tribes peel off the, the root of the cassava and wash it fairly well until the chemicals are leached off the cassava root. Another chemical compound are cardiac glycosides. And as the name suggests, cardiac glycosides have the ability to interfere with the heart function. Many plants that contain strong concentrations of cardiac glycosides are in the milkweed family. Another chemical compound are terpenoids. These are fat-soluble compounds that prevent the growing process in insects. Some terpenoids have the ability to discourage insects and fungi. Interestingly, terpenoids in this case may hurt leafcutter ants pretty badly. So if you incorporate terpenoids in the fungi culture of leafcutter ants underground, definitely you're going to give them a lot of trouble. Also, we find toxic amino acids. Some tropical plant species have great amounts of toxic amino acids, especially those in the bean and pea family, the legume. These amino acids are useless in the building of protein, and instead they interfere with normal protein synthesis. Calcium oxalates are also present in some tropical plant families, some of which are very familiar to you guys, like philodendrons, for example. Crystals of philodendrons and other aroids have these calcium oxalates, which substances have the ability to actually burn soft mouth part tissues and even the skin. Some members of the arm family have such strong calcium oxalate concentrations that they're able to actually burn the skin. Indigenous tribes here in Costa Rica, as well as in South America, use the substances of some aroids in order to burn warts. I mean, such high concentration of potent chemicals in this plant have the ability to actually destroy the warts, and Indians used to use it for that purpose. But plants, besides chemical compounds, also have another broad spectrum, another weapon, if you will, besides the one that they already unfold that we were just talking about. They also have a whole new spectrum of defenses, not in this case not chemical, but of defenses that will discourage insects. Many tropical plants and trees, as the ones you can see here, have sap in their trunks, like that one over there. That tree, member of the Moraceae family, mulberry, contains, and most members of this family contain sap in the tree trunk. When a boring beetle, for example, comes and bores in the wood of this tree to lay its eggs, the first thing it's going to encounter is definitely a white sap in which it will be trapped and suffocated. Other plants have resins and thorns and prickly surfaces that avoid certain creatures from producing extensive damage to the plant. This is just a very brief overview of some of the defenses of the plants. Some of the plants have just evolved a very hard cuticle, like this palm right here. This very strong cellulose surface that remind us of plastic have the ability to actually have no digestive substance for insects. So a lot of insects are definitely not going to be interested in these kinds of plants because they're rather waxy. What you hear in the background are cicadas, and they've been pretty commonly heard throughout most of the videos we've made, but well, this is just what happens in the rainforest. Insects, since plants are loaded with chemical compounds and it's very hard to adapt to each and every chemical that plants have, insects instead respond by becoming specialists in one particular kind of plant. So this fashion of becoming a specialist has become very, very efficient for insects, and of course have helped them to recognize pugnacious chemical compounds in some plants to actually be able to eat them. In other cases, insects have the ability to actually bleed chemical compounds off the leaves that could be harmful to them in order to actually eat the remaining part of the leaf with less chemical compounds. Some caterpillars, for instance, have the ability to bleed the papaya leaf veins by cutting them with their mandibles, letting them bleed the sap chemical compounds that the papaya contains to discourage insects. And once it's been bled, the caterpillar comes about and starts feeding on the leaves. That's just an example, but there are probably dozens of other examples on how insects actually figure strategies out to actually reduce the chemical load in the leaf surface, or simply become very well adapted to the chemistry of the plant. Some insects even have the ability to detoxify in their metabolic system. Once they've ingested the leaf, they have the ability to detoxify all chemicals and actually even incorporate those chemicals to their metabolic functions and become themselves toxic. This is the case of heliconid butterflies, which are among the prettiest butterflies found in tropical rainforests. But yes, the rainforest is loaded with amazing interactions that have helped each and every organism find its tiny little niche in this very amazing ecosystem. Ethnobotany is the study of how indigenous people have learned how to use vegetation and other components of tropical rainforest for their own benefit. Ethnobotany also includes a consideration of other uses of plants for food and fiber. Native people in the tropics throughout generations have experience of, have learned how to use chemical compounds by trial and error. Usually the knowledge and understanding of what's in the chemical composition of plants and other uses is in the hands of a very important figure of the tribe. Shamans are the ones in charge of dealing with chemical compounds of plants, turn them into something that could potentially cure disease, and of course they are also in charge of transmitting this knowledge to future generations. So they become the teachers and the practitioners, and they're pretty much like in an elite within the caste or the hierarchy of the indigenous tribe. Chemical compounds of tropical plants can have multiple uses. They can cure disease, pains, fungi problems, bacteriological infections. They can kill animals with the chemical composition of certain plants. They can intoxicate or poison fish. In other words, they can live pretty much just by finding the necessary things. Think about this rainforest as a huge hardware store and a big pharmacy, both combined, that provide indigenous tribes with the necessary items they need for their daily lives. If you look at this tree, for instance, we're looking at a tree that belongs to the hibiscus family, Malvaceae. One of the important characteristics of this tree is that it's got a very soft wood, used very little for timber purposes, but the bark of this tree is extremely strong, flexible, and it can be used in construction to tie up pieces to make palapas or huts. Indigenous people here in Central America as well as in South America use strips of the bark of this tree not only to build structures but also to make dresses so they can cover themselves with the materials of the bark of this tree. Here's another tree. This one belongs to the Verola family. It's a wild nutmeg, hardwood, but it contains not only in the leaves but also in the bark hallucinogenic substances that actually are considered among the strongest of all hallucinogenic substances found in any of the tropical plants in a rainforest. This plant at the same time produces wild nutmegs that can be eaten when are completely ripened and of course feed a wide variety of animals, becoming pretty much like a little fast food restaurant in the middle of the jungle where people can visit when in fruit and of course obtain animal source protein for their diets. Here's a sapling of one of them. Right next to the parent tree. This particular tree is very abundant in tropical forests. Fishtail palms, like these ones you see here, are consistent and they have the shape and form of corrugated tin roof. This is one of the finest construction material for roofing that indigenous communities use in Central and South America. Another example of how even leaves can be used for household applications. Another interesting thing that people are intrigued by is curare. This substance which is contained in a variety of plant forms can be extracted from certain plants in the aroid family, like these ones right here. Some of the calcium oxalates contained in this particular plant mixed with chemical compounds of other plants can produce the mixture in the right amounts of known as curare. So curare doesn't really come from one specific plant, but it comes from a variety of different chemical compounds mixed together in order to create the right cocktail that hunters will use when they go out in the woods to hunt for animals. Curare has the power to relax muscle, so it will produce a paralysis once the curare gets into the bloodstream of the animal. But also the animal liver will have the ability to decompose the curare after a while, so people won't get harmed when they eat the flesh of the animal. So that will give people time to actually paralyze the animal, put it under control, and later on sacrifice it and slaughter it. So this is a way of actually hunting with effectiveness in the tropical forest. In recent years, especially in the decade of the 90s, there was a huge movement here in Costa Rica to actually draw in Merck Pharmaceutical, to actually create a partnership with Costa Rican companies and universities to study more the chemistry of tropical plants and, of course, develop medicine that could be sold to the public um, in different parts of the world. In fact, today, a small percentage of the drugs prescribed by medical doctors come from chemistry of plants, but it's just in the process. There's another company called Shaman um, Pharmaceutical that is also doing a lot of chemical research on plant uh, compounds in tropical rainforest. There was a university here in Costa Rica created in the past. I think it was in the 90s, early 2000s, that was created to um, assess the inventory of plant life existing in tropical rainforest in Costa Rica, taking advantage of the fine and fabulous national park system we have, in order to understand the potential and then develop it as a business. This is just in its forebears, in its infancy. This requires heavy investment um, from private companies and, of course, the interest of scientists in local communities in order to develop more the chemical industry of the tropical pharmacy. Thanks for being with us today, and we will learn more in other videos.